Let's talk some chess. This game was played in 1987 with some familiar faces: Mikhail Tal with the white pieces, Anatoly Karpov with the black pieces. It's a blitz game that was played in Brussels, Belgium, and Tal starts us off with e4. Karpov responds with c6, the Caro-Kann defense, and Tal plays an interesting move here, c4, not something you see every day, and this allows Karpov to split the difference with d5. We have white takes on d5, black takes on d5, white takes on d5, and white is temporarily up a pawn, but this pawn is under attack by the queen and is not currently defended. First, Karpov puts his knight on f6, doesn't take the pawn yet, but you have two pieces attacking the pawn, and there's no way for white to defend it sufficiently. Tal defends it insufficiently by playing knight to c3, again, just one defender to two attackers, and Karpov takes the pawn back with knight to d5. Tal develops his other knight to f3, and Karpov says, okay, I'll just get these knights off the board with knight to c3, and Tal takes back on c3 with the pawn. So now we have, both the material is even. Tal has his knight out on f3. It's sort of a weird pawn structure, but might improve as the game goes on. Karpov doesn't play the best move here. He plays g6, which is going to allow him to fianchetto his bishop, but probably want to develop some pieces first or attack in the center. And Tal says, okay, you want to fianchetto your bishop. I'm going to try to make that bishop weak by limiting this dark square diagonal, and he plays d4. Karpov continues with his plan of fianchettoing the bishop, and Tal develops his own bishop, his light squared bishop, to d3. And this bishop, as we'll see in this game, is going to be a very powerful and important piece. Both sides castle king side, so both sides are safely tucked away behind their pawns and, in black's case, bishop. And here Karpov develops his knight to c6. Tal puts his rook on the semi-open e file, so now we sort of have the rook nicely controlling this file. And here Karpov, I guess, wants to challenge that rook eventually, but also maybe is a little bit worried about this pawn, this e7 pawn, so he puts his rook behind it. And sure enough, Tal puts his bishop on g5, attacking the pawn twice. This pawn is sufficiently defended. It has the knight, the rook, and the queen defending it, but I guess Karpov just really wanted to make sure that the pawn didn't fall. And another measure to protect the pawn is by putting the bishop on e6. This obviously, I'm going to mute for 1 second. I don't know how to mute, but looks like we got through it. So it puts the bishop on e6. Now it's blocking the path of the rook, and also develops a piece and nicely kind of controls these light squares. Here is the first sort of Tal-esque move that Tal plays. He takes the bishop with the rook on e6. This is a really nice exchange sacrifice, and black really has no choice here but to take back with the pawn. Nice exchange sacrifice. We'll see a couple reasons why, but one reason is you can't take this rook with any of these pieces. You have to sort of ruin your pawn structure and take with the f-pawn. And now, not only do you have these really awkwardly doubled pawns, but your king is a little bit more open, which Tal is going to take advantage of, as he always does. So Tal maneuvers his bishop to c4, and already we have one attacker for this pawn, and this is not a very easy pawn to defend. A lot of these pieces, obviously the dark square bishop by definition can't protect this pawn, and these two rooks are going to have a tough time protecting it. And it's a double pawn, so it's difficult to protect. And to make matters worse, it's now pinned to the king, so it can't move. So we're going to see these, both sides sort of struggling in a battle over this pawn. The first move is queen to d6. Obviously, this adds some protection, but Tal now puts his own queen on e2. Now we have two attackers on it, and Karpov has this nice knight to d8 move. This was the square that was just vacated by the queen, and now you have two defenders of the pawn, but Tal says 2 is not enough. I'm putting my rook on e2. Now I have 3 attackers, and what are you going to do about that? Karpov says, I don't, forget the pawn. I'm going to put my rook on c8. You can take the pawn if you want, and then, maybe, knight would take, and then I guess queen would have to take, and you trade, and probably it's still okay for black. But instead here, Tal says, I'm not going to take the pawn. I'm going to put the knight on d2, which protects my bishop, even though the bishop was already protected, just adding another layer of protection to that light squared bishop. Here, black breaks the pin, always a good idea. Now this pawn can freely move. And now Tal shows kind of the real idea behind this knight to d2 move. He plays knight to e4. This comes with the tempo because it attacks the queen. So the queen now moves to this c7 square, abandons the defense of the e6 pawn, but it is sufficiently defended right now by the knight because it's only attacked once by the bishop. And the queen, this also comes with an attack of the queen on the bishop. And now this bishop is attacked twice by the queen and the rook. It's protected only once by the white queen, so the bishop must be moved, or something, you know, that threat must be dealt with. And Tal just puts his bishop on b3. And now, don't forget about this bishop. We're going to see it come up in this game a lot later. It's a long-range bishop that is going to be really important for White's attack. Black was probably very tired of protecting that e-pawn, so he says, okay, I'm playing e5. And pretty funny, this pawn was the subject of 5 pieces attacking and defending it, and it didn't actually get taken. It marches on, so plays e5. And instead of taking here, instead of taking the pawn, Tal makes his own pawn move with h4, which is a pretty gutsy move. You're opening up this h2 square, opening up the defense of your king, and you sort of have the queen ready to jump in the attack, maybe this dark square bishop. So a gutsy move that Tal always is sort of used to playing. Karpov takes the pawn on d4, and now this f7 pawn has had this really nice march all the way to d4, and you sort of have to start worrying about this pawn because it's getting deep into White's position. You certainly don't want to allow takes on c3, and then it's protected by the queen and the bishop, and you can just push it all the way to promotion. Tal says, you don't have time for that. I'm going to push my own pawn with h5. Again, another very, very gutsy move. So Black says, I got to get rid of that pawn. That pawn is cramping my style. I'm going to take on h5. But this allows queen takes on h5, and this comes with an attack on the rook on e8. Not only does it come with an attack on the rook, but obviously the bishop, the queen, the knight, even this long-range bishop, which I told you not to forget about, these are all coming within a very close distance of the black king. And just like that, the king's 3 pawns have now just become 1 pawn. One of the pawns is off fighting on d4. The other was just taken by the queen on h5. So Tal's pressure is slowly building, and it will reach a crescendo shortly. Karpov puts his rook on f8, puts it on a semi-open file, also gets it out of the path of this white queen. But now Tal, a really nice sort of sneaky move here, plays bishop to c2. I guess it's not that sneaky because the idea will become obvious. Once this knight moves, you have a battery of a bishop and a queen attacking h7, obviously threatening checkmate. It's also nice because if pawn takes on c3, this pawn can't just march all the way to promotion. The bishop is obviously blocking it, and it's tough to get rid of that bishop. So a really nice move there for Tal. Karpov decides to centralize his queen. This is a nice move as well because the queen is obviously more central, and now it's pinning a couple of pieces. So the bishop, the dark square bishop, is pinned to the queen because the queen is undefended. The black queen can just take it, and the knight is pinned to the rook because if the knight moves, then the queen will just take the rook on e1. I actually like that. If the knight moves, that's a good song. I should work that in more. So now take a second and see if you can find Tal's next move. Try to figure out how you can continue this attack when you have this really nice centralized queen. And just, it seems like Black's forces are sort of protecting the king sufficiently, so see if you can find out how to continue this attack as White. Okay, so there may be a couple of good moves in this position, but the move that Tal played was the stunning g3. And we just said that this knight was pinned. It was pinned to the rook, but Tal doesn't care about that. He allows Karpov to play queen takes rook on e1 with check. This obviously comes with a tempo. Only real move here is king to h2 to safety. So you just gave away a rook, kind of unsure why. Now Black is threatening to take on c3, which would come with a tempo on the bishop, and the queen is obviously deep in White's camp, so you really have to be careful here. But Tal planned this out well. And sorry, I gave that away. Tal planned this out well. The queen is now, the black queen is now off of e5, and now you can sort of see Tal's plan. If it's Tal's move, of course Tal will just play queen takes on h7 with checkmate, so you now have to defend this really carefully as Black. And I should mention, the knight moving away opens up this double attack of the queen and the bishop. So that was sort of the goal of Tal's, to clear this corridor for the bishop, and he cared so much about opening that corridor that he allowed this queen takes on e1 with check. So now the corridor is open. What do you do as Black? And this is actually a very tough position to defend. The correct move here doesn't look like the correct move. It is bishop to h6. This looks like it gives away a bishop, and it absolutely does. But the nice thing about this move is after white takes back, I'm not sure which one is better here, but after white takes back, you have this rook to, let's take with the queen, it'll make more sense. You have this rook to f7 move, and the rook is protected by the knight if it's ever attacked, and now the rook is guarding this h7 square, and it's tough to continue the attack as white. Not only is it tough to continue the attack, you have all these forces kind of bearing down on you and sort of ready to attack your own king, so the attack is sort of dead here, and this was actually a drawn position with proper play. Black is also just up material here, so this would be tough to play. So this is the correct move, to give away your bishop, because the bishop right now is preventing this f7 move. The bishop is blocking the rook from guarding the h7 pawn, so that's the right move to play. What Karpov played is, I think, what a lot of us would play. Looks like a very natural move, h6. The bishop is protecting the pawn. Now you can't obviously play checkmate on h7 because the pawn is blocking you. So it looks like it's all good, but now take a second and see if you can find the checkmating pattern here for white. Awesome. So hopefully you decided to give away your bishop on h6. That's exactly what Tal played. And now, it's never fun when you put a piece on a square and then it's just taken immediately. And this is, can you take this bishop? Can you take the bishop back with dark squared bishop on h6? And the answer, of course, is no. You get queen takes on h6, king must go to g8, and then queen comes to h8 with checkmate. All of these squares are taken. And again, don't forget about this long-range bishop. This bishop is supporting the queen and allowing it to deliver checkmate. So that it doesn't work to take the bishop. So what black plays here is sort of the only move, which is g8, trying to get the king out of harm's way. But now you have this really nice bishop takes on g7. And now you're just in a world of trouble as black. Here, Karpov tries to get sort of a counterplay and open up some space for his king, perhaps, and also get the rook to f2. It's a blitz game. I'm not sure what the time was, but now you have checkmate in just a couple of moves. So queen to h7, again protected by this bishop. Maybe Karpov is also putting the rook on f2 because it attacks the light square bishop, but there's going to be no time for that sort of thing. So queen to h7 check, the only move here. All these squares are taken, so the only move is king to f7. And it might look like the king is able to run away and sort of run away to the queen side. These files are protected by black's pieces, but now you have this really nice sort of dance of queen to g6. This prevents the king from escaping any further and forces it back into the mating net, so the king has to go to g8. And now you have a beautiful sidestep checkmate with bishop to h6. So again, all of these squares are cut off. The bishop is slicing this way, so the king can't run away. And again, this wouldn't work if you played, for example, bishop to, I'm sure it's still winning, but if you play bishop to f6, the king can move to f8, and maybe it's trickier to keep the king inside the net. But instead, bishop to h6 keeps the king on the king side, only move is king h8, and now you have this wonderful queen to g7 checkmate. Or if you prefer, queen to h7 checkmate, either one works. I think the game ended after this sidestep checkmate, but you sort of get the idea of how it would end. So a really fun game, an awesome attacking game. Again, proper defense wouldn't have gone, as well as it did for white. Would have had just sort of a draw, but it's a blitz game, so what are you going to do? And it's always fun to look at these attacking patterns and the sacrifices and disrupting the king's pawns and then going after the king itself. So hope you enjoyed. Drop a like and a subscribe, and we'll see you next time.